Hello everyone and welcome to the Activist Lawyer podcast. My name is Sarah Henry and I'm your host to this podcast, which offers a platform for lawyers to share their story and their journey into law and activism. Our guests will discuss the challenges and highlights of their work, as well as important cases, opinions on legal and political matters, and will offer up advice and tips for anyone interested in pursuing a career in human rights law, public interest law, or criminal justice. The Activist Lawyer podcast is brought to you by the Granite Podcast Studio. Thank you so much for listening. Dr Yousef Aljamal joins me in our Newry studio and he is currently visiting Ireland. So when this goes out, I think he still has quite a few events coming up, but was able to fit us into the Activist Lawyer podcast as he takes part in a series of public events, talks and discussions connected with his work as Gaza Coordinator of American Friends Service Committee in partnership with the AFSC. So you will see on their website and their social media pages some of the events. We will also share links to it in the show notes of this podcast. Now, central to the visit, to the reason why Yousef Aljamal is here in Ireland, is around his co-edited book, If I Must Die, which is a powerful collection honouring the life and legacy of Refaat Alareer, who is the Gaza poet, teacher and mentor and very good friend of Dr Yousef Aljamal, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike in December 2023. So I'm not going to go into any more detail because Yousef has been so kind and generous with his time and shares wonderful memories and experiences that help inform his writing, which is so important as he and colleagues and people like him seek to document what's been happening in Gaza through words and through writing. And it's a really interesting conversation, but also very, very touching. And it's been a real privilege to speak to Dr Yousef Aljamal. We will post some links to events associated with this schedule and this visit to Ireland as part of the show notes. So have a look. And yes, thank you as always for listening in, and please share and review where possible. Hello everybody. Welcome to today's special episode of the Activist Lawyer podcast. I am delighted to be joined in our studio here in Newry by Dr Yousef Aljamal. Dr Yousef Aljamal, thank you for joining me and taking time out of your schedule today.
Thank you for inviting me and having me.
Not at all. Okay, so before we get into some of your activities and the programme events and talking about your work here that you're sharing with us here in Ireland on this speaking trip, could we go back in time a little bit and tell us a bit about yourself and your upbringing in Gaza and what inspired you at first to engage with writing and activism?
So I grew up in Al-Nuseirat refugee camp in Gaza, and it's one of 8 refugee camps that were actually established by the American Friends Service Committee back in 1948. And it's the same organization that I work for now. Before UNRWA, the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, was established in December 1949 and took over these refugee camps. As I said, I grew up in a refugee camp. In fact, I grew up in what used to be a British prison in the First World War that was turned into a refugee camp in 1942, even before the Nakba, to receive Greek refugees who fled Nazis who invaded their islands and ended up in Gaza.
Wow.
It's a cycle, very interesting history there. And the way in and out of the refugee community where I grew up is still the actual gate of the prison, the British prison that hosted also Greek refugees for about 1 year before they were able to return back to their home. That spot, it's also interesting to mention that the Israeli surveillance of our movement in and out of the refugee community, especially in the first Palestinian Intifada. My dad one day was going back home from work in Israel because Israel also exploited a lot of Palestinians as cheap laborers. And he was stopped at the entrance of Block A by a group of Israeli soldiers who were armed to the teeth, and they asked him to dance to humiliate him in front of his neighbors. He had no choice. If he said no, they would have, beaten him. Mm-hmm. But he was smart enough to ask them to clap for him so that he could dance. He needed some vibes, and once they started doing that, they put their guns aside, and he picked up his slippers and he ran away. He hid in one of the nearby orange groves. He climbed one of the high trees, and they kept looking for him, and people started laughing at them instead of, making fun of my dad. And he had a beautiful voice, and at the time he wasn't able to communicate with his worried family. His parents were worried about his fate. Some people said he was injured, beaten, captured, but he had a beautiful voice, and he used his beautiful voice to make the call for prayer. It was sunset time, and this is how he was able to communicate with his parents. I'm telling this story to, again, give you an idea about the intergenerational trauma that we grew up in, that I suffered from, and my father suffered from, and his father suffered from as a refugee. My grandfather passed away in Gaza in his refugee camp without being able to return back to his village. My father also lost his life to the genocide 2024 due to the lack of medicine, and I've lost a total of 16 family members, direct family members, including 4 of my siblings and 5 of their spouses and 6 of their children. But despite, these challenges, and being, in a refugee camp in Gaza, we thrived. We received education thanks to the network of free schools that UNRWA ran in Gaza that provided us free education, but also free healthcare. We were able to go to school and excel and learn, foreign languages. I finished my PhD from Turkey about 3 years ago, and I wouldn't be here today talking about this experience without this help that I got from UNRWA. And now we have a war waged by Israel against UNRWA to delegitimize the UN agency. In the refugee camp, life is not easy. It has never been easy, even before the genocide started in Gaza in 2023. The refugee camp is very crowded. There are no services. There is always a fear of Israeli attacks, Israeli surveillance. Water is unfit for human consumption. A lot of people struggle economically in Gaza because of the ongoing siege, and this is all before October 7, 2023. And again, this is the life we have had in Gaza growing up. It's full of loss and trauma and fear that we might be the next target. Travel in and out of Gaza has always been very complicated. Israel, which left Gaza physically in 2005, always controlled the borders of Gaza, and whoever gets in and out, and they imposed a siege all over Gaza, restricting access to the Mediterranean, but also to borders and crossings of Gaza with the outside world, including the Rafah crossing with Egypt. So this is the kind of life we had. I remember getting a lot of injuries playing on the street in Gaza because streets were not paved and we did not have parks to play. And the kind of games we played was also influenced by our trauma, the reality of occupation. One of the games that we always played was Israeli soldiers versus Palestinians. And in this game, Palestinians would be beaten by Israeli soldiers. So this is the kind of life we had. I grew up in a family of 13 siblings in the refugee camp, and all my siblings went to school. My parents made sure that they invested in education and the future of my siblings. But again, throughout the years, I've lost 6 of my siblings because of the occupation. And our house was also bombed during the genocide, killing 9 of my family members in a single airstrike in September last year. So this is the kind of life we had. Now, as a result of the genocide, our family is scattered. Some of us live in Turkey. The rest of my family lives in Gaza, and they continue to struggle in terms of access to food and water and Israeli attacks that do not stop. I always repeat, the so-called ceasefire in Gaza is the silence between 2 Israeli airstrikes. And just yesterday, Israel killed 8 people and injured 29 others. So this is the kind of ceasefire we have. We have about 670 Palestinians who have been killed by Israel since October 2025. And Israel continues to control 60% of Gaza.
Well, Yousef, thank you for being so candid and for sharing that. And I think you shared a lot of the trauma behind the headlines. We see the headlines, but we don't really get to see or hear about the reality and how it impacts families, not just numbers. And the children are now reported as numbers. Behind each of those numbers was a family, somebody's world. And I'm thinking about your father, who lived through so much, only to sadly die quite recently, and to have lived through all of these stages of the Israeli occupation, cruelty, violence and aggression, which is daily and did not start on the 7th of October, which we're all obsessed with and focusing on. So thank you for going through that, and you have suffered unimaginable loss with your family. So how you have the strength and resilience to do the work that you're doing. And leading into that, I suppose, how did you see writing and using words as a way to, maybe both share kind of these individual stories and journeys, but did it help you in any way? And why do you see that as a way and a medium to share what's happening in Gaza?
The late Palestinian intellectual Refaat Alareer used to quote a native Canadian who asked colonizers, if this is your land, where are your stories? Stories are very important to document what's happening. Telling your story is also a means of healing. It helps you heal, especially under unimaginable, loss and displacement. And again, documenting these stories is very important. We've seen the example of the Palestinian Nakba. So I spoke about what happened to the Palestinian people briefly since 1948 with the establishment of Israel. But when we speak about Nakba, the concept of Nakba, the Arabic word for catastrophe that describes the Palestinian people, the mass exodus and displacement, ethnic cleansing that took place in 1948, that led to the creation of Israel, we speak of an event that never stopped. It's an ongoing Nakba. And what's happening in Gaza today, the genocide, this is the last episode in this ongoing Nakba against the Palestinian people. But the Nakba generation is almost lost today. And many of these stories have not been documented. And now in Gaza, we have more than 2 million stories. Everyone in Gaza has a story. And we need to document these stories and tell the stories of people. This is history, and we need to preserve it, because part of Israel's war on the Palestinian people is a war on memory and narrative. And they're trying to change the narrative by removing narrators, like Refaat, for example, or ordinary people on the street, killing them along with their stories. These are people who suffered immensely during the genocide, and they've lost family members. They've seen a lot. They've seen starvation. They've seen buildings collapsing on people. They've seen people under the rubble. They did not have access to food. They were too afraid to go outside to get food, and food was very expensive. And they have many, many stories to tell. So it's important that we preserve these testimonies and write back. I see writing as a form of resistance. And that's why, again, I keep quoting Refaat, because he played a central role in my life. Refaat chose the title Gaza Writes Back for his first edited book, and writing back here is an act of defiance and resistance. It's like the empire writes back. In a way, you have to resist and push back and present your narrative. It's also, you have a guilt, the survivor's guilt, like living outside Gaza, but also having your family there that has been massacred. This is another level, and one way of elevating this guilt or feeling of guilt is to write down and tell their stories and be their voice and advocate for their rights. Like in my case, I have access that they do not have. I can travel, I can speak, about their agony, and not just my families, but also the agony of our neighbors and friends, people, who we went to school with, our friends, our neighbors, our community, our refugee camp of 100,000 people. So I have this platform, I have this tool, I can do that. Also, I think we are not exception to history.
Yeah.
There are many examples throughout history where people have been wronged and oppressed, including here in Ireland, but also in South Africa and Algeria. And this also gives me hope to continue writing and speaking up throughout history. I mean, Refaat was assassinated because he spoke up. Yeah. Malcolm X was assassinated because he spoke up. But eventually, people emerge victorious. And as Irish people say, our day will come. The day of the Palestinian people will also come. Yeah. And we will live in freedom and dignity and have, equal rights. And this is what keeps me hopeful. And like seeing people on the street supporting Palestine 2.5 years after the genocide started gives me hope. And people who are willing to learn and ask questions, and the change in the narrative, the change in the public opinion vis-a-vis Palestine has been huge over the past 2.5 years. And this gives me hope to continue doing what I'm doing. And as part of that, I worked with my colleagues at the AFSC to publish a book titled Displaced in Gaza, and documents the stories of 27 Palestinians who survived the genocide. And these are the stories of, men and women, students, farmers, etc., who endured the genocide, and we're documenting their work. It's sad that at the AFSC, we started working in Gaza back in 1948, starting refugee camps, as I mentioned earlier. And today, 77 and 78 years down the road, we're still doing the same thing, and it's only getting worse.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And we had a quick chat before about the organisations that have been banned from providing support, advocacy and aid in Gaza and in the occupied territories. So I'm keen to hear more about the work of American Friends Service Committee. But first, maybe just staying on Refaat, because I'm glad that I was able to follow his work before he was, as you said, targeted and killed deliberately by Israel to silence him, because his words were reaching globally and his bravery and his courage was noticed and stopped. So just to say, I'm very grateful, and I'm sure a lot of people listening who have followed his work, for you and your colleagues to continue to spread. I think it's so important. And I think it's a fantastic, opportunity for people who don't know about his work in particular here and the other countries that you're travelling through to get to know it. Because If I Must Die was such a world-renowned and very impactful poem. And I'm just keen to maybe learn a little bit more about your relationship with Refaat and how he was, I suppose, as well, and how you continue to kind of carry that torch for him in terms of your work.
So I met Refaat in 2007. I was his student at the English language department. But there was a reputation in the department around him that he's very tough and he doesn't give grade easily. So there are a lot of students who avoided him, or they feared his classes and his style of teaching. I took two courses with him, and I almost failed the first course. And in the second course, I excelled because I understood his style and what he wanted. He wanted to create a journey of a generation of Palestinian writers and bloggers, people who believed in narrative and storytelling, people who had awareness of global literature and global struggles. So he was very intentional and global in his class. Yeah. He brought many global texts to our classroom. We traveled the world through his lectures and through his books, pages that we read, although we were living under siege in Gaza. We got to know about American literature or English literature or Irish literature, or even literature written by Palestinians in the diaspora.
Yeah.
In his classrooms, we got to know about African literature. And he always repeated this African proverb, until lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So he wanted, again, to create this generation of young Palestinian writers who can write back. who can serve as lions and grand narrators for their own people. Otherwise, the history of the hunt will glorify the hunter. So over the years, my relationship with Refaat became very close. We traveled together to Malaysia. While in Gaza, we worked on a library called the Hashim Sani Library. It's named after the late Chief Justice of Malaysia, Hashim Sani. And we were able to get about 3,000 books, both in Arabic and English, into Gaza. And this library was turned into a hub for training. Refaat trained hundreds and thousands of young people on creative writing, social media, translation, diplomacy. And he wanted them to believe in themselves, and he wanted them to write their own stories. He would always remind them that they have a unique story that needs to be told. And he would repeat, publish or perish. In the context of Palestine, again,
Brilliant.
There is a war on our narrative, our history. So as a result, now we have a lot of writers out of Gaza who write in different languages and who are very active on social media. In Malaysia, Refaat did his PhD. He loved Shakespeare and he wanted to do his PhD on Shakespeare. In fact, there were jokes in the department, English language department, that Refaat kept a pillow of Macbeth and Hamlet under his pillow when he slept. But he would laugh at these jokes. He was a fun person. So from outside, you fear him.
Yeah.
There's this reputation about him. He's tough. No, he's the best human being. He's very humble, very helpful, very dedicated. And again, it's always the bad students who go and create these rumors about him because he was tough with the grades. I have to say that he was tough with the grades. But the number of students who got A's in his classes was always higher than the number of students who failed his classes. Yeah. But it's always students who fail his classes who create this reputation that this is a tough person, you should avoid him. He did his PhD on John Donne as a revolutionary poet. So he was engaged with the revolution and he loved Malcolm X and he taught Malcolm X and he introduced us to Malcolm X in Gaza. As I said, throughout the years, he dedicated, I would say, 23 years of his life to narrative and storytelling. He was very proud to be from Gaza and he stayed in Gaza. He loved his hometown of Shuja'iyya. Everywhere he went to, he told people that he's from Shuja'iyya. But generally, because he spent so much time teaching young people on creative writing and storytelling and narrative, he himself did not write much in his life. Yeah. But he was able to co-edit a book and edit a book, so a total of 2 books. Mm-hmm. Gaza Writes Back and Gaza Unsilenced. Gaza Writes Back has been translated into 12 languages. Half of these translations happened in Refaat's life during his lifetime. The other half happened after he was assassinated in December 2023. And again, he always encouraged his students to seek knowledge, to travel outside. He would write them recommendation letters, but he would always remind them that they need to come back to Gaza and serve the community there. And that's why he did not leave Gaza. He had the opportunity to leave. Yeah. He's well-educated, very smart. But he chose Gaza and he wanted to tell Gaza's story, and for this exact reason he was assassinated by Israel. I remember traveling with him throughout Malaysia and the United States promoting Gaza Writes Back, and he was a man of humor. He loved life and he loved trying new foods, learning about other cultures. He was always fun to be next to. He was very smart. Language was his game, I would say. He would use language to, make fun of things and create the best situations or crack jokes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he was very well-versed in cultures. He would understand, for example, competitions between cities. Right. I imagine if he comes to Ireland today, he would be talking about Cork and Dublin. Yeah. So he talked about Chicago and New York when he was in the United States, and competition over pizza, for example. Right. But again, he's a man of life, and if you look at his poem, he says, "If I must die, That's not something he ever chose. Refaat chose life. He was a man of life, a man of laughter, and a man of knowledge.
Oh, gosh. And, his words still will touch and continue to touch people around the world. And I think it's clear that his message will continue and will survive. So you've co-edited this book in honour of Refaat. And I know he had a good relationship with Ireland and had friends here, obviously had a huge appreciation of Irish literature. Yes. How has the book been received here? And what has the response been like so far to If I Must Die, the book that you've co-edited? And where can people find the book?
So, he had a special relationship with Ireland. He read Irish history and the connections between Palestine and Ireland, settler colonialism and boycott. And in fact, he taught the works of George Bernatcho, and to the best of my knowledge, he taught at least one novel by Gerry Adams while in Gaza. And he always encouraged his students to read about other histories, including that of Ireland, and make connections between Palestine and other histories and other struggles. And what I'm doing today, promoting If I Must Die, the writings, poetry and prose of the late Palestinian intellectual Dr. Refaat Alareer, is a drop in the ocean of what Refaat has given me and his students of guidance, feedback, patience, of humbleness, even financially helping his students, including myself, donating books to students who couldn't afford to buy books, giving dozens, I would say hundreds of classes for free. He never charged students. Mm-hmm. This is, a life that should be explained and told. Yeah. This is a huge legacy. I think If I Must Die, which he wrote in 2011, in November 2011, to his daughter Shayma, is the poem of the century. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen a poem that has been so popular in my lifetime and to the best of my knowledge over the past century. It's been translated into 400 languages. On X alone, it was read by 35 million people. And Shayma was also assassinated along with her husband and newly born child in April 2024, just 5 months after Refaat was assassinated as well, along with his brother, sister, and 4 of his nephews and nieces. But Refaat penned the poem to his X account a month before he was assassinated because he felt that his life is coming to an end. He received a lot of threats. There were smear campaigns against him online by journalists, including Barry Weiss in the United States. Others, Israelis threatening him. His inbox was full of hateful threats and messages. So he penned this poem to his X account a month before he was assassinated. And a lot of people were looking up to his updates. And if he disappears for a day or two, people would be texting me and asking. Their relationship with Refaat was not just a relationship between someone following someone on X or Twitter. It was much more than that. People looked up. It was
cherished.
Yeah, it was cherished, and people looked up to his updates because he had a very unique way of telling the story, using his dark sense of humor. And people would sometimes ask him, Refaat, how do you laugh? How do you joke, even under these circumstances? But that's Refaat, someone who loved laughter and life, and he liked to crack jokes even during a genocide. And then he was killed, and Israel wanted to silence his voice, his very powerful voice. He was very prophetic in many different ways, and he anticipated many things that happened later.
Yeah.
And he was able to read through the lines and the threats, and I think he knew that Israel would end his life. And the fact that he wrote this in 2011, If I Must Die, speaks of this reality, of this ability to anticipate things in advance. He was very smart. He multitasked. He was into movies, drama, chocolate, football, travel.
Just life.
Yeah, he was into everything.
Yeah.
And I would always remember him carrying a book under his elbow and like running quickly because he didn't have much time to give a class here and there. He dedicated his entire life to his students. That's why when he was killed, a lot of his students felt shocked. And like personally, I lost 16 members of my family, direct family, to the genocide. But losing Refaat was also still a whole different level. And again, this is what I'm doing today, honoring this legacy, honoring this life, and promoting this book that I collected of his writings, poetry and prose, written by him throughout the years, that has the name of his very famous poem, If I Must Die. And the poem is very philosophical, at the same time very simple. So the language is very simple, and everyone can relate to the experience of someone in Gaza flying kites and trying to find hope amidst difficult circumstances. But it's also philosophical in the sense that this is not a death we choose. It's imposed on us. We love life, but this is what happens to us. And everyone who reads the poem comes out with a responsibility, a task to tell the story, so that, turning this death and this murder of Refaat into a tale that will bring hope and change to the future of the Palestinian people. That's why people connected with this poem, people relate to this poem, and they sing it, they recite it everywhere at protests. You find it at walls. It's, again, as I said, it's the poem of the century.
Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing such wonderful memories. It's lovely to hear about him and, his relationship with you and others, and how he impacted so many people and touched so many people. So the book is available now, is it, to buy, or how will people be able to access?
So the book is published by Or Books, O-R.
Okay.
So people go to Or Books and search If I Must Die.
Okay.
There are many platforms that sell it, but Or Books is the publisher, and it has sold tens of thousands of copies.
Brilliant. Well, we'll share the link to that as well. You mentioned there the work and the presence of American Friends Service Committee in Gaza, and of course, were you recently appointed to the Gaza Coordinator? Is this a role?
So I've been working with the American Friends Service Committee for about 2 years now.
Okay.
In fact, it's 2 years today.
2 years today. Oh,
yeah.
Happy work anniversary.
April 15. And but my relationship with the AFSC goes back to at least 2014. I was told about the work of the AFSC by a Palestinian elder named Ahmed Al-Hajj, who received aid from the AFSC back in 1948 as a refugee.
Wow.
And he lost his life in 2024, also under siege. Same story, at the age of 90. And he lived his entire life in a rental house because he thought that Gaza is not his home. He wanted to go back to his village, which was ethnically cleansed in 1948 and became part of Israel. In 2014, it was the AFSC that brought me Refaat Alareer, a contributor to Gaza Rights, back to the US to promote the book, along with Just With Books, the publisher of the anthology. And again, the AFSC has been working in Gaza since 1948, establishing Palestinian refugee camps for about 2 years before UNRWA, the UN agency, was established and took over these refugee camps. And the FSC has organized many speaking tours for Palestinians from Gaza to come to the US and speak about their life. One of the projects they worked on was Light in Gaza. It's another anthology that also Refaat contributed to. And this is where Refaat spoke about his life, opened up for the first time ever. I learned a lot of things about his life. Although we were very close, he wouldn't speak about his life much. And I learned that his uncle was killed under torture in Israeli jails. His brother was killed in 2014, and his parents survived death, and he himself was shot in the leg as a teenager. Gosh. So that's Refaat, and even in the poem, the child flying kites, that's Refaat doing that in Shuja'iyya, in his hometown. He loved doing that, and he talks about this and his contribution to Light in Gaza. So Light in Gaza envisions the future of Gaza. That was just before the genocide, and it was published by Haymarket.
Okay.
Was downloaded 65,000 times.
Oh.
It's available for free if people want to get the PDF version of the book. But again, it sold 10,000 copies. And Displaced in Gaza is another project, and now we're working on a new book about people who sustain the community during genocide. We have the Action Hour for Palestine every Friday, 12 Eastern, where we meet online. There are a community of 150 to 200 people who join every Friday since October 7, 2023. We give updates about the situation in Gaza, and sometimes we have guests from Gaza, Palestinians and non-Palestinians, webinars, artist features, also updates from the West Bank, and then we make calls to Congress. We get Americans to pressure their politicians to take action on certain issues. We have a traveling exhibition in collaboration with Visualizing Palestine, titled Why We Record. People can find it, download it online, and even have it anywhere in the world. We have the Apartheid Free initiative, where people can take the pledge to be apartheid free, and there are 1,100 communities all over the world who joined and took the pledge.
Brilliant.
And every community can join this pledge. So this is the work we do. This is we've been doing, and it's a long commitment. I mean, if we look at the history of Quakers in Palestine, it goes back to Quaker missionaries.
And it's a Quaker organization.
Yeah, the AFSC is a Quaker organization, Quakers establishing the Ramallah Girls Friends School in 1869. So long time ago. Yeah.
Amazing. And I know the programme of events that you are involved with this week, being organised by a number of local activists and organisations, is focused on an interfaith kind of model as well. So looking at different communities in the north of Ireland, bringing them together to learn about this work. And you've said so far that people have shown, a great interest in learning about Refaat in particular. But it's something maybe that we lack here a little bit. And the communities, as you know already, are very much divided. And that even feeds into the conversations around Palestine and Israel. How do you think we kind of get over that and maybe come together? What can we do to get a more kind of interfaith, inter-community response to what's happening, and that people fully understand what Palestinians are going through, and to support?
So I think the question of Palestine and the issue of Palestine and genocide in Gaza has nothing to do with sectarian divisions and rifts. It's a question of human rights, of people who have been wronged and oppressed for over 80 years at least, and no one should look at it from sectarian lenses. It's totally different, and it's an issue that brings people together rather than divide them. Even if people have divisions, internal politics, this issue should not divide any people, because what we've seen in Gaza is very clear. It's a massacre of women and children, and killing of 72,000 Palestinians at least. 9,000 people are still under the rubble, 3,000 people are still missing. So we're talking about 85,000 people in total. Yeah. And a huge number of people, about 172,000 people have been injured. And we do not have a ceasefire even. It hasn't stopped. Like 670 people have been killed since October 2025, since the so-called ceasefire went into effect. So this issue should not divide people. It should bring people together. And in fact, it's an opportunity. I see it as an opportunity. It's a platform to bring people together, people who have disagreements on other issues. Palestine shouldn't be associated with a certain political party. Every person with conscience should defend Palestine, whether they are people of faith or not. It's just, I think, very natural to oppose oppression and support human rights. In the United States, there are people from different, faith backgrounds, and people who do not have faith at all who support Palestine. Yeah. And this is very powerful model that survived the test of times, and it's been very effective. And I think this should be the case here as well. Yeah. Poetry and literature and storytelling resonates with everyone. And that's why actually Refaat chose fiction over non-fiction, to write Gaza Rise Back. Yeah. He thought that fiction could be read 100 years later. It could even be read by Israelis. It transcends the boundaries of time and gender and, all these political differences that we have. So I think storytelling is important for people, that brings people together. Yesterday I spoke at Borders Line, and it was a community of people from different backgrounds who decided to listen to each other and have a conversation. And again, they listened to my stories. The same as they have stories, I brought stories to them, and they liked my stories. And I think exchanging stories and experiences is the first way to bridge these gaps and bring people together and show them that this issue is not about sectarianism. It's not about divide. It's never meant to create more divide. It's the opposite of that, to bridge the gaps and to bring people together and to see Palestinians as people who deserve freedom and equality, to see them as honorable human beings who deserve full human rights. Rather than to feel, empathy and to feel sad, and where these stories could serve as a means of creating rage that could be translated into political action. Yeah.
I'm glad you shared about that event. That was in Belfast, wasn't it?
Yes.
Last night, yeah. And you've spoken to me about hope earlier on in our conversation, and how, you feel, and we've spoken to other Palestinians as well who see solidarity around the world and the growing movement. And I think it's easy for people to kind of give up hope and to say, this isn't making any change. So I'm so pleased to have heard you share your thoughts on that people should keep going and don't let the momentum slide as we build solidarity movements around the world, not just for what's happening in Palestine, but globally. And of course, storytelling, I feel, plays a major role in that. We're obviously lawyers here. The activism has been part of, the work that we're trying to promote. But it's all intertwined in the end, because we're sharing the stories of lawyers in Palestine and in Gaza. And the law, of course, accountability, international law, and how that's been impacted, and how, people have lost faith in that as a model. But it's all intertwined. And I'm wondering how you see things going forward. What message would you like people to take away from, your tour this time, and what, can people contribute?
Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish says, hope is the disease that Palestinians cannot be cured from. Because if we lose hope, we're lost. Again, looking at history, we're not an exception to history. And hope is the thing that keeps us going today. If you look at the situation on the ground in Gaza, it's very sad and tragic and catastrophic. And if you think about it, it makes you feel like there's nothing that could be done. There's so much death and destruction that curing this place and bringing it back to life will take ages. But also looking at history, Gaza was destroyed almost completely in 1917 and was rebuilt. Gaza was destroyed multiple times throughout history. There are many cities, great cities. Gaza is one of the oldest cities in the world. It was destroyed multiple times throughout history, and it came back to life. The symbol of the Gaza municipality is the phoenix. And the phoenix is a bird that lived in Arabia about 700 years ago. And it represents and symbolizes rising from the ashes. It comes back to life, and this is the story of Gaza. It comes back from death, from ashes. And I have no doubt that the people of Gaza will rebuild Gaza. We have one of the highest education levels in the Middle East. We have the human capital and expertise to rebuild our country. In fact, Palestinians have contributed to the construction of many countries in the Middle East because of the high level of education we have. And I have no doubt that this will be the case in Gaza and elsewhere in Palestine. I'm hopeful because of the solidarity movement, as you said. And I do not see the future of Palestinians any way different from the future of the Irish people, or the future of the South African people, or the Algerian people, or Vietnamese people. History has its course. Sometimes it's tragic. But there's no case in history where oppression became the law forever. Resistance is the law when there is oppression, and this resistance will lead to liberation and dignity and human rights. And we too will get there as Palestinians, as a nation. We will rebuild, we will rise from the ashes. Gaza will rise again. And it's very interesting in that the word "goes" in English comes from Gaza. There was a nurse healing people in Gaza. This is how the word came about in the English language dictionary. And this is what Gaza needs today, healing. And Gaza will heal and emerge victorious again. After 2 years of genocide, Israel couldn't push Palestinians out of Gaza. Their dream has been to see Gaza without Gazans and Palestine without Palestinians, but this did not happen. We're still there. We're still everywhere in Palestine, and we are the majority between as Palestinians, the Jordan River and the Mediterranean. What Israel has is an ethno-state built on genocide and apartheid that tries to maintain control over another nation using force. This is what we have today, and this is something that should never make them feel proud. It's shameful. Netanyahu is facing, genocide charges before the International Criminal Court. And even though we have seen a genocide, which is the worst thing to see on earth, Israel is also divided today. And sustaining apartheid and control over a nation by force is not sustainable. It will not work. It never worked out in history. And eventually we will win.
Well, and that's a powerful message of hope. Dr Yousef Aljamal, thank you so much for joining me here in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks everyone for joining me today. If you like the show, please remember to share and leave a review if you have a moment. And you can also check out our website, www.activistlawyer.com, where you will see some blog articles written by our guests and contributors, as well as some fabulous Activist Lawyer merchandise.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.